The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session. It is July 5th, 2026, and I just got done celebrating the 250th anniversary of my country. So, to any of my American subscribers out there, I hope your July 4th went very well, rather if it be with friends, family, etc. So anyway, getting away from all of that, along with a few upsets that had just occurred in the World Cup in the last few days or so, let's get on with today's Ukraine war update. Now, first of all, we're going to be talking about the Kharkiv / Dnipropetrovsk direction. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Where do I even start? Now, I just want to point out before I go any further that once again, we are using my map and not the Syriac map due to some inaccuracies and also due to the fact that I think the Russians may be deeper in a few places that some people may not think otherwise. But anyway, Kharkiv direction. As you can see here, there are reports that the Russians, after seizing control of Novoselivka, even though Ukraine fanboys like to say otherwise, they have not only broken into the villages of Ihorivka, but also into Chervona Krynytsia, which would be pretty much adjacent to the road going into Kharkiv, right here. And yes, before I, again, go any further, I used to say Orikov or Orikiv. Well, apparently the correct way to pronounce this town's name is Kharkiv, or Kharkiv. So, yeah, sorry if I butchered the pronunciation of this town for a very long time, but I finally got it right, at least for American standards, so don't complain any further. But anyway, they have broken into Chervona Krynytsia, and as far as I know, it is a gray zone based on all sorts of satellite imagery that was released. Apparently, there is some big shelling here right now, and I wouldn't be too surprised if the Russians are in this village. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. And if they're able to capture and consolidate Chervona Krynytsia, the last, or the most prominent road going into Kharkiv will be cut off. So Omanik won't even be useful anymore. It will be completely useless. And then from Chervona Krynytsia, they would then have to capture the village of Preobratsinka. And then that's it. They will cut this road off here, and Kharkiv will essentially be, for the most part, encircled by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So yeah, it's looking quite tight here right now, and as far as I know, the armed forces of Ukraine's advances in the direction of Stepnogorsk have been stalled, at least for now, though Ukrainians have been continuing to send in all sorts of soldiers into this area in order to reach Kamyansky. But so far, they have not achieved any further successes after initially taking most of Stepnogorsk. Now, moving on to the Gulay-Pulay, well, former Gulay-Pulay / Dnipropetrovsk direction. So more and more villages are being put into this gray zone, or as I like to jokingly call it, the quarantine zone, because of the shit ton of lies and disinformation has been spread by both sides in this war over this area here. And as far as I know, it seems that Kopani, Dolynika, Rivne or Rovno, and Lizne, their situation is unclear. The armed forces of Ukraine do not have control over these villages, but nor do the Russians. There is a large area here that many would describe as a kill zone. So it is not easy to describe, or it's easy to call, like it's not easy to call like exactly who controls what in this sector. It's just not possible. FPV drones ruined this war. It has made it slower, more deadly, and, well, what can I say? Just an absolute nightmare for everybody in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And then going further to the north, we have an even bigger mess here. So it appeared after like February and March that the armed forces of Ukraine had complete control over, for the most part, this part of the Dnipropetrovsk region. But now it seems, with recent news being put out by the Vostok group, which is the eastern group of forces in the Russian army, it seems that a lot of mappers may have jumped the shark too soon. And the Ukrainians' control over this area may not even be existent at all. A lot of Ukrainians apparently have died trying to take back this decently sized parcels of land here from the Russians. And the Russians have reportedly have been recorded, surprisingly, in Alexandrovka, right here. The Russians have claimed to have captured Alexandrovka from the armed forces of Ukraine, and according to the Ministry of Defense, now obviously people are going to shit on them for reporting this capture in the first place because they apparently didn't consolidate. They claim that they're going to cross the Volga River and make an attempt to take over the town of Pokrovsky. Now, if they're somehow able to pull that off, then we have no choice but to basically paint all this back in favor of Russia. But for now, I'm going to keep it in the gray zone because, again, it is too damn confusing on who controls what. Syriac has an even messier depiction of the situation, but for now, though, I'm going to keep everything in a gray zone. Nobody controls anything here. It's sort of like Dobropila direction last summer in 2025. But yeah, if the reports are true that Russia did in fact capture Alexandrovka from the armed forces of Ukraine, well, Pokrovsky might be cooked. I don't know how deep or shallow the Volga River is, but if the Russians are able to cross it and secure a bridgehead here, then yeah, Pokrovsky may already be cooked. And according to some local Russian sources that I have, sources that are not available to the general public, Vostok might be already deeper in Dnipropetrovsk region than what's being initially reported. So yeah, keep that in mind going into the rest of July and especially August. Now, moving on from that mess, and yeah, this is still a gray zone, so don't jump to conclusions here. We also got reports that the Russians have broken into Sergivka again after they were reportedly pushed out. They have started the battle for this village, and if they're able to capture Sergivka, then they're going to enter Dnipropetrovsk from the E50 road. I mean, they'll literally have next to no issues going into Andronivka here, and also capturing Kalinovka. And then from that point on, they can just flank Mazova from the north, which is what I think they want. I think they're going to try to take Slovyanka right here, and then head for Mazova from the north, and then voila, here it is. And then Novopavlovka will finally fall to Russia, and that's the ball game for the armed forces of Ukraine, at least in this chunk of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Now, moving a little bit to the Dobropila direction, I was informed, again, by my local Russians, on Telegram that is, that the reason why they are not moving more into the Dnipropetrovsk region is because they need the city of Dobropila in order to secure control over the E50 road. I'm not so sure if that's necessarily true, but I'm sure they want to take it just in case. But also they want to capture the rest of Donetsk region, which also might explain why. But on in recent reports, Shevchenko, which is on the southern flank of Dobropila city, is being contested right now between the Russians and Ukrainians. And some fields were also captured by the Russians too, north of Vasilovka and Novoalexandrovka. Also, in addition, the Russians have supposedly broken into Dobropila, but we've already discussed this in the last or so video. And in addition, Bieletsky reportedly is still being contested, though some are suggesting that Ukrainians are retaking some ground here in the town itself. And by the way, it appears that Rudensky is about to be completely cleared of all possible Ukrainian DRGs, so Rudensky is no longer going to be a problem for the Group of Forces Center, and that will be that. Now moving towards the Konstantinovka direction. Oh boy, this is going to be a controversial one because I made the decision that there is just not enough evidence available, despite, of course, some flag videos and shit, that the Ukrainians control the situation in Konstantinovka in any shape or form. And for that reason alone, I have to agree with the MOD's report that Konstantinovka did fall to the Russians. And that's exactly what I did. I painted basically every single block in Konstantinovka under Russian control. I mean, there's pretty much no doubt about it now. I mean, at worst, they don't have like 5 to 10% control of the city. But another thing to take to consideration, and this is why I think Ukrainians are going to be kind of a pain in the ass for a while about it, is that there are still some troopers, like hardcore dedicated troopers out there in the AFU that are still in Konstantinovka. They're like hiding in commie blocks, basements, etc. They're going to hold out for a while, and they hope to delay the push into Alexeyevo, Druskovka, and Druskovka itself. So this is already the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk direction, for the most part. Some would call it Druskovka direction, but I'm just calling it Sloviansk-Kramatorsk direction. But yeah, Konstantinovka has fallen to Russia, and yeah, Ukrainians are going to have to withdraw from the pocket west of Chasiv Yar. So situation for them is not looking good. If anything, it's only going to worsen. I do believe from a terrain point of view, the Russians have overall the advantage over the armed forces of Ukraine in this direction. Though keep in mind, Ukrainians are probably going to put up a heavy fight here. I mean, it's Donbas. Like, what do you expect? So anyway, going further up to the north, yeah, basically no changes here in the main direction towards Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. But, however, we got some breaking news coming out of the outskirts of Mykolaiivka. Now, as all of you know, Mykolaiivka is the largest town, if not suburb, before you enter the city of Sloviansk in Donetsk region. And according to Thorkill, who is a pro-Ukraine Polish account on Twitter X, and I guess Telegram, Mykolaiivka's battle is pretty much about to start, if not started already. So after they captured the village of Piskonivka, the Russians are already clashing with Ukrainians in the dacha areas of Mykolaiivka, and are also trying to seize control over Starodibka. Sorry if I butchered the pronunciation. I'm American, once again. But anyway, yeah. Starodubivka, right here, or Starodubovka, right now is allegedly contested right now by the Russians. And if they're able to capture this, Mykolaiivka is pretty much cooked. Because the Russians can then enter from the north, and there's not really a lot of supply routes that go into this town right here, which contains a good chunk of commie blocks, and the central Rada building is located here. Control over Mykolaiivka means that the Russians will have a direct pathway into the city of Sloviansk, and perhaps the northern outskirts of Kramatorsk, and they can use the E40 without, I guess, many major obstacles. Though I'm sure some fortifications and drones may say otherwise. But one thing is certain, Ukrainians that are still in the city of Sloviansk, and I'm referring to Ukrainian civilians, need to get the hell out now. Because if they don't, they may get caught up in a battle that's probably going to get them killed, if not wounded. Which could, of course, lead to some limbs being amputated. That would suck. So if any of you are watching this right now from Ukraine and can understand English, get out now before it's too late. Now, moving towards Liman. Here's the thing. I had a large chunk of Liman in the gray zone, mainly the southern and central parts. But thanks to a few geolocations provided by the group of forces Zapad, who are one of the more polarizing parts of the entire Russian army, I made the conclusion that the Russians do in fact control most of Liman. Now, this of course could change, and that the Ukrainians could retake the initiative from the Russians here. I mean, Zapad has choked a lot, but can they do it again? I don't know. But for now, I'm going to keep Liman, for the most part, under Russian control, including its commie blocks, its central Rada building, which is right here. And yeah. And then going a little further northwest, the Russians have started to push back the armed forces of Ukraine in the strategic town of Dobryshovo, or Dobroshive. Right here, they have taken back this part of the town itself, and the Ukrainians are once again struggling to contain the Russian advances here. There were some optimistic reports on the Ukrainian side of things that they are trying to isolate the Russians within Liman, but I can tell you for a certainty that those reports are not true, and that the Ukrainians and their fanboys are lying, as usual. Now, obviously, Russia and their fanboys can lie a lot, but I feel like the Ukraine fanboys are more prone to lying. I don't know why. They just are. And also, we got another gray zone here, or as I'd like to say, jokingly, a quarantine zone. Karpovka, Rikhodub, Novi Mir, Druz Heli Ubivka, Krikovka, Tiver, Dokil, Bove here. Apparently, a lot of these... Oh, also, one last one. Cherneshnia. Sorry if I butchered the pronunciation there again. Apparently, a lot of this is in a gray zone. So, there is a possibility, at least according to recent geolocations provided by the Zapad group, that the armed forces of Ukraine may have been ousted from the remainder of Lugansk region that they still controlled since 2022. You know, when they went on that infamous counteroffensive that made it look like they were going to win the war over Russia. But now it's 2026, and the Ukrainians are clearly a trip to hell. So they can't exactly win the war anymore, but they can at least try to stop the Russians from taking over all of Ukraine, as I said on multiple occasions. They can't win, but what they can try to do is freeze the conflict along the line of combat contact. But I don't think that's going to happen because Russians are advancing slowly but surely. So yeah, we got a big chunk here in Lugansk region that is not really... Basically, there's a huge fog of war here, especially in a tiny portion of the Kharkiv region. And also, I think the group of forces west also claimed that they have taken control over the village of Shikivka. Personally, I don't see enough evidence for this, so I'm going to press X to doubt for now. But without a doubt, because of the recent situation in the city of Kupiansk and its eastern adjacent towns and cities, I have no doubt that the Zapad group is going to try to finish the job off in Borova this year. It's definitely going to happen, and the Ukrainians will probably be forced basically back from the Oskar River towards the city of Izium and into other parts of the Kharkiv region. So, getting away from Borova direction, the Russians, for the most part, have cleared the eastern side of the Oskar River, and I probably think they're going to finish the battle for this part of the Kupiansk direction probably by either mid-July or late July. It will not go into August, but the battle for Kupiansk itself certainly will. So, according to recent geolocations and also various mappers, the Russians have not only seized the initiative in Kupiansk city because of the recent news coming out of the eastern side of the Oskar River, but apparently they have recaptured the commie blocks and the central Rada building, though it's probably in ruins by now. There's also some reports that the Russians have also entered southwestern Kupiansk again, but there's not really enough evidence to prove those claims, so I'm keeping it in the gray zone. It's a madhouse right now in Kupiansk, but we can already say for sure that this direction here is coming to a close. And once Kiev Sharifka and Kupiansk Vozlove are cleared out, that's it. There will be no more Ukrainians on this side of the river. Well, at least in the Kupiansk direction, that is, like East Kupiansk, that is. And that'll be it. They may have to evacuate their forces from Borova direction, too, because they're literally about to get encircled, which will be another PR disaster for President Zelensky and General Syrskyi, who runs the armed forces of Ukraine. Now, moving towards probably an unexpected direction that just got a breakthrough. Anatoly Radov, Last Armor, and Divjin, Divjin being the least credible of all of them, have reported a breakthrough in the Kharkiv region by the group of forces north. Apparently, the Russians have broken out of Volchansk city and also from the small villages here along the Volcha River, and have taken control of all these fields, along with also seizing the village of Zamlini Yar, and have also broken into Bely Kolodiez, a small town in the Kharkiv region that the Russians used to control in 2022. If they're able to take control over Bely Kolodiez, then we can probably expect the armed forces of Ukraine in this part of the Kharkiv region to just flat out collapse. They will melt away, and they'll be forced down south to the sizable town of Veliki Burlik, which is a strategic crossroad area that not only goes to Chugiv, but also ultimately to the provincial capital, Kharkiv, or Kharkov. I do think that the offensive towards Veliki Burlik is imminent, though, I mean, I think this might be part of the offensive towards Veliki Burlik. So, yeah, these fields here are supposedly under Russian control, according to multiple pro-RU sources. And considering that the armed forces of Ukraine have not really reported a lot of good news in this area as of late, I honestly don't doubt that the Russians are already this close to Bely Kolodiez. Now, because this is all open fields, the situation could transform quickly, which would not be good news for the Russians, but it seems as if the Russians are deeper than we think in Kharkiv region. And if Bely Kolodiez falls, then pretty much all these villages here, which are in the gray zone, including Losovka, Shistorovka, and Ukrainsky, if Bely Kolodiez were to fall here, then everything here, along with Volcha here, will be under Russian control. And also these Ukrainians that are in Verkna, Pisarivka, and Grafsky, they'll be forced to retreat across the Servetsky Donets River. And then I guess from here, the Russians are going to try to advance down the Servetsky Donets River, and then they'll try to go as far as the town of, let's see here, how to pronounce this? Pichny. I don't know if that was correct, but it would take them as far as maybe Chuguyev right here, which is one of the big towns and cities in Kharkiv region. So yeah, so big breakthrough here for the Russians, and it's very likely that they're probably going to clear out this whole area of Ukrainians maybe by August or September of 2026. So yeah, AFU is clearly showing its lack of manpower here, and if they were to sacrifice this direction, then yeah, it would look pretty bad on the news, especially after all the work they did in Kharkiv region 4 years ago when they forced the Russians out of here. But as time goes by, a lot of what the Russians lost in September 2022 is going to be slowly recovered, if not completely recovered. But yeah, there's not really much going on in the Sumy region, though. I've heard some reports of Russian advances here, but not really anything too noteworthy to report on. Also last night, there was a big attack on the city of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. And yeah, that's going to be it. So tell me in the comment section below what you think of the recent news coming out of Ukraine. And I'll see you guys in the next 3 days from now when I make my next video. And I'll see you all next time. So take good care of yourselves and peace out. Bye-bye.